I'm Stan from Eagle Vision. I'm here again with Ben Payne. Ben, welcome.
Thanks, mate.
So we're talking about what does it take to go from a speculator property developer to a full-time development business. And in this episode, we're going to start talking about methods to capital raise, because clearly capital requirements are going to be much greater when you get to the next level up. So Ben, when it comes to just the first step up, what are some of the options that developers have?
Yeah, so typically the first step that once a developer starts, and again, as we mentioned in the last video, if they're starting from a smaller base and a smaller project, typically to go to that next step, they're mainly looking at the small scale offerings,
right? Okay.
In regards to the ASIC exemptions, around documentation, in regards to your disclosure documents that you need to present to investors.
Sure.
But also in regards to the types of investors or the amount of investment that you can actually seek under those particular offerings. So there are a lot of limitations with doing the small scale offerings, and as we're finding a lot of development these days, in terms of the value of where properties are at, and escalating construction costs, etc.
Yeah,
we're having to raise a lot in capital these days to get through projects.
Sure. So following on from that, if a developer wants to raise a small-scale offering, what do they need to do? What are the steps to go through it?
Okay, so essentially what their limitations are going to be in terms of, first of all, how much money they can attract and how many investors they can attract. There's a rule called the 20-12-2 rule.
Right.
Because basically they can attract 20 investors into their project over a period of 12 months.
Right.
And with a maximum investment amount of $2 million combined between those 12 investors.
Okay, right.
So it rather limits, correct.
Yeah, got it.
And particularly when we're talking about, so although that there's a 12-month, and it's a rolling 12-month rule.
Okay.
The reality is, because we're talking about property development, we're talking about capital raising.
Yeah.
It makes it difficult to tranche out capital raising. So we can't have a capital raising point for the first 12 months and then do a secondary one, because then we start triggering all kinds of other events and potential CGT events, stamp duty events, etc. from doing that. So, so typically with property development, your capital raising stuff all up front.
Yeah.
So you've only got that single opportunity. So it's really that you're going to be limited by that $2 million cap.
But that money can be used as the initial deposit perhaps, and then bank funding and some of the other
correct
to be utilized.
Correct.
Sure.
So some of the other limitations with the small scale offering exemptions with ASIC is the fact that you can't promote the actual offering anyway. So you can't promote it on a website, you can't promote it on social media, or particularly like Facebook, even if it's a closed group, and LinkedIn, these type of forums.
Right.
You can't actively go out there and promote.
Okay.
You're limited to actually dealing with people that are already in your specific networks.
Okay, sure. So you should know these people.
You should already know them.
Yeah.
They can't be new to you, and they should have expressed an interest, then they're interested in what you're actually doing before you actually send them anything in regards to an investment opportunity within there. So, so there is a lot of limitations. There's also, you can't solicit by outside of promotion.
Right.
There's also anti-hawkering provisions as well.
Okay.
Through with ASIC that actually stop you from being able to solicit by making phone calls, etc., and direct cold calling people to actually solicit investment.
Yeah, sure.
So you are quite confined in terms of who you can actually approach for your capital raise. Now, that might be the same group of people that you've already capital raised from anyway in the first place for your smaller projects.
Right.
That they might follow you along, but if you need to require to go further, then that's when, and we'll get to that in our next session.
Sure.
When we need to have to start to look at other aspects and other capital raising opportunities. To be able to widen your net.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So beyond small scale offerings, without getting an AFSL license, are there any other options for property developers to capital raise?
Yeah. So commonly, it's not so much capital raising, but commonly you'll see a lot of developers using joint ventures.
Right, okay.
So typically, there's various different types of joint ventures that are conducted in the development space. So you get developer landowner joint ventures. You get developer and developer joint ventures, where you get two developers aggregating their money together, and they might carve off a site and then both undertake their own developments past that point. Or one might be taking the residential component, the other one's taking commercial component. So we also
build a developer sort of
build a developer JVs. Or you might just have a typical JV, which is just an equity partner JV. And partnering with a developer.
Right. Okay.
Now, the key principles around those type of JVs and those and how they're conducted. And whether or not they need to be licensed with ASIC and have an ASIC to do those comes down to the control and the way they're conducted.
Okay.
If you're still marketing out an opportunity to an equity partner, there may technically be the requirement for an ASIC.
Okay.
But typically the way that they've done is that you've already aligned yourself to an equity partner. You've both got control, joint interest and management in the actual joint venture. And so that gets around to requirements in terms of the A to sell controls, because technically you don't have an investor, you're doing it in joint management and control with each other.
So then both parties are entitled? Is that what you kind of mean?
Yeah, there's other ways, and I mean, we've done, I think we did another presentation on in the past about joint ventures and joint venture structuring, but there's different ways to structure up joint ventures, but and sometimes it may be, jointly on title, or there might be a nominee that's on title on behalf of the on behalf of the.
Or there's a unit trust and then units are owned within that, and all sorts.
Well, that comes into a different vehicle altogether. Outside JV,
So that's not a JV.
No.
Okay, understand.
But typically, in terms of joint ventures, as I said before, no requirement for an ASIC license. And as we mentioned before, with those small scale offerings, as long as you apply to those rules, then typically you don't have the requirement for an AFSL license. So they're more of the lower cost, I suppose, vehicles, the easiest ones to actually get set up and actually start operating. As opposed to, other ventures and other
more complicated. Correct. Yeah, understand. Thank you for watching.